My son-in-law walked out on my daughter right in the middle of labor, and he did it with the calm of a man stepping out for a smoke, not a man about to become a father. One moment May was gripping his hand so tight his knuckles turned white, fighting through another contraction, and the next he was staring at his phone, mumbling that he needed a break from all this tension. The hospital lights made the whole room feel colder, her fear, his indifference, and my own anger beating like a drum inside my chest. "Murphy's is across the street," he said, almost annoyed. "I'll come back when things actually start happening." Then he slipped around me and walked out, letting the door swing shut behind him as if he wasn't leaving his wife alone at the most fragile moment of her life. May's eyes filled with tears that had nothing to do with the pain. "Dad? He'll come back, won't he? I'm 50 years old, not old, but old enough to know exactly what kind of man Lowell was showing himself to be." Still, I leaned close, brushed her hair from her forehead, and lied because she needed comfort, not truth. "Yes, sweetheart. He'll be back. The nurse, Darla," paused in the doorway and gave me a look that said she'd seen this type of man far too many times. Her squeaky shoes moved fast as she grabbed fresh linens, muttering under her breath about some folks not being raised right. That alone made me want to punch a wall, but I just took my place near May, my back already stiff, my legs aching from standing too long. When May caught a short break between contractions, her face slick with sweat, I tried to lighten the moment just to keep her steady. My voice shook a little, so I talked the way I tend to when I'm nervous. "Subscribe, hit the like button, and tell me in the comments how old you are and where you're from. For you it's just a small thing, but for me it's the reason I keep telling these stories." May let out a tired laugh, more of a breath really, and said, "Dad, you're doing that thing again." I smirked because she wasn't wrong. Sometimes humor is the only thread that keeps a man from unraveling. I stayed right there as the hours dragged on, holding her hand when she needed strength, wiping her forehead when the contractions stole her breath, and thinking about that empty chair where her husband should have been. I thought the worst part of that night was watching my daughter fight through labor without her partner beside her. But I was wrong. The real shock waited for us just a few hours later when Lowell finally called, his voice frantic, begging for help, and May refused to pick up the phone. May's labor rushed forward without giving any of us time to breathe, and the delivery room suddenly felt too small, like the walls were leaning in every time she cried out. Darla moved around with the focus of someone who'd done this 1,000 times, while I did my best to imitate calm, even though the only birth I'd ever witnessed before was a goat on my uncle's farm when I was 16, and at least that goat didn't leave the barn to go drink with his buddies. I tried to steady myself by leaning on the rolling bedside table, forgetting it rolled, and nearly sent an entire stack of gloves crashing to the floor. Darla shot me a look so sharp I felt it in my spine. "Sorry," I whispered. "It's on wheels," she said dryly, and May actually chuckled through her pain. A tiny laugh, but a laugh all the same. I kept rubbing her arm, telling her she was doing great, even though my voice trembled. Inside, I felt something stretching: anger, fear, a kind of heartbreak I didn't know fathers could feel once their kids were grown. I kept thinking, he should be here. He should be holding her. Not me. But every time that thought rose, I pushed it down. I couldn't afford to let her feel even an ounce of that disappointment. Hours passed like minutes. May dragged in shallow breaths, whispering that she didn't want Lowell back in the room, even if he did show up. "It hurts enough already," she said, and I pretended not to hear the double meaning. I reached for the water cup and spilled half of it on my own jeans, making it look like I'd been the one who panicked. "Great," I muttered. 50 years old and I can't even hold a cup right." That got another weak smile out of her, and she leaned her head against the pillow, exhausted. Then, just as the doctor arrived and everything became serious, my phone buzzed. Not once, 3 times. Persistent, I stepped back, glanced at the screen, and saw the name that made my jaw clench. Lowell. No text, no explanation, just call after call. Darla nodded toward May. "If he's coming back," she said, "it better be now." But something cold had already settled in my gut. I knew that man. I knew his patterns. He didn't call because he realized his mistake. He called because something went wrong for him, not because something was going wrong for May. I walked to the corner and answered, whispering, so my daughter wouldn't hear. On the other end, his voice cracked with panic, real panic, not the dramatic kind he used when he wanted attention. "Cliff, I need you to come get me," he stammered. "Something happened. Please, man, Please just come. The noise behind him didn't sound like a bar anymore. It sounded like trouble. Heavy trouble. I stared at the door, then at May, then back at the phone. And for a moment, the world held its breath. I didn't know it yet, but the choice I made in that moment would change the shape of our family forever, and it would break whatever was left of the bond between my daughter and her husband. I stepped into the hallway, trying to shield May from the sound of Lowell crying into the phone. The corridor smelled like disinfectant and burnt coffee, and the floor was so shiny I could see the panic on my own face reflected back at me. "Cliff, please," he gasped. "They took my wallet, my phone, everything. I'm stuck behind the bar. I don't know where I am." For a second, I honestly thought he was joking. Lowell was the king of dramatics. He once called us at midnight because he thought he broke his ankle, but it turned out he'd stepped on a Lego. But the noise behind him now wasn't the sound of a man exaggerating. It was shouting, glass breaking, someone yelling for a manager. "Cliff, please," he said again. "You're the only one I can call." Hearing him say that made something twist inside me. The only one, when just 2 hours earlier he'd abandoned my daughter like she wasn't worth his time. I opened my mouth to give him a piece of my mind, but then May cried out from inside the room, one of those raw, painful cries that rips straight through your chest, and I froze. "Listen, Lowell," I whispered sharply. "My daughter is in labor. Right now. This second. She needs help. I need help too," he said, almost offended, as if we were comparing whose crisis was more inconvenient. That's when May's voice, harsh and exhausted, rose from behind the door. "Dad, don't go. Please." Her fear cut through every thought. I pressed the phone to my chest, trying to muffle it, and took a shaky breath. For a moment I wished I had someone older and wiser to tell me what to do, but at 50 you're the one people look to. You get your own instincts, and whatever dignity you've managed to gather along the way. Then I heard Darla's voice. "Cliff, she's at a 9. If she's calling for you, she means it," Lowell shouted through the speaker. "Are you coming or not?" That snapped something in me. Not anger, just clarity. A simple, heavy truth that landed in my gut like a stone. My daughter came first. She always had. She always would. I lifted the phone again and said in the calmest voice I could muster, "Lowell, find somebody else. I'm staying with May." He went silent. Completely silent. Then he hissed out one sentence that told me exactly where his heart really was. "She won't forgive you for this." I almost laughed at the absurdity of it. Him warning me. "Son," I said, rubbing my forehead, "that's the one thing I'm not worried about tonight." I hung up, slipped the phone back into my pocket, and realized the pocket was inside out. I must have tugged it wrong earlier. The phone nearly dropped through the hole, and I had to slap my thigh to catch it, startling a passing nurse. "Sorry," I said. "Gravity hates me." She shook her head and muttered something about men and their pants, which honestly was fair. I re-entered the room just as May clutched the rails of the bed, tears streaming down her face. When she saw me, she didn't ask where I'd been or what Lowell wanted. She just breathed out, "Thank God." But even as I took her hand, I felt a chill crawl up my spine. Something told me Lowell wasn't done with us, not by a long shot. The room transformed in seconds. Nurses rushed in, the doctor snapped on gloves. Machines hummed louder, and May's grip clamped onto my arm like she was trying to anchor herself to the world. I'd seen storms roll across cornfields back in my hometown, sudden, violent, unstoppable. That's what the moment felt like. A storm breaking open right there under the harsh white lights. "Dad, stay," May gasped. "Don't move." "As if I'm going anywhere," I said, though my knees were shaking badly enough to qualify as a minor earthquake. I tried to shift my weight and bumped my hip hit the metal tray behind me. A whole pile of gauze packs slid off like snow from a roof. Darla glanced back with the face of a woman silently reciting a prayer for patience. I whispered, "It jumped at me," and May managed a pain snort before the next contraction hit. The doctor told her to focus, to breathe, to push, all in that crisp tone that made it sound easy, like assembling furniture. Meanwhile, I was sweating under my jacket, and in my panic, I tried to take it off. forgetting I still had one sleeve caught under May's hand. I ended up half wrestling myself, flapping like a pigeon with a broken wing. She groaned. Trying not to pass out, I whispered, freeing my arm at last. Can't have two of us collapsing in here. But deep inside, under all the clumsy humor, something heavy churned. Fear sharp, unfamiliar. Not fear of the birth itself, but fear that I wasn't enough. Fear that I was filling in for a man who didn't deserve the privilege, and that May deserved far more than my shaky comfort. I kept thinking, what if she needs something I can't give? What if I fail her? At 50, you think you're steady, experienced, ready for life's punches. But that night, I felt like a boy pretending to be a man. May screamed again, body curling forward as the doctor called out instructions. The air felt thick, like it carried all our worries at once. I wiped her forehead with a cloth that I later realized was actually the sleeve of my own jacket. Dad, she gasped between breaths, you're using your coat. Well, I said, it's absorbent and it was clean when I bought it. Her exhausted laugh cracked into a sob, and I squeezed her hand harder. A sound cut through the chaos, small, wet, new. A cry so fragile it made my breath catch in my throat. For a moment, everything froze, the machines, the panic, even May's trembling body. The baby's cry filled the room like a spark of light in a cave. My granddaughter, she was here, May sobbed with relief. I felt my vision blur, and I wasn't sure if it was tears or the fact that I'd forgotten to breathe for 15 seconds straight. The doctor lifted the tiny girl onto May's chest, and May looked at her daughter like she'd just been handed the reason for every hardship she'd ever endured. But that moment of peace didn't last, because as May held her newborn, Darla, still holding the birth paperwork, looked at me with raised eyebrows and whispered, "You should know. There's someone downstairs asking for you." And before I even asked who, I knew the storm wasn't done. For a few precious seconds, I pretended I hadn't heard Darla at all. I stayed beside May while she cradled that tiny, red-faced miracle against her chest. The world felt softer, almost sacred, until my brain reminded me of the words, "Someone downstairs asking for you," and the moment cracked like thin glass under a boot. May was drifting somewhere between tears and exhaustion, whispering to the baby in a shaky voice. I brushed her hair back, trying to keep my smile steady, but inside, I felt that same old pressure rising, the one that comes when life refuses to let you have a quiet moment without testing you right after. "I'll be right back," I murmured. "No, Dad," she said weakly, gripping my wrist. "Please don't leave me alone." That hit me harder than anything Lowell ever said. I bent down, kissed her forehead, and whispered, "I won't go far. I promise." My promises mean something. Well, I stepped into the hallway and immediately tried to walk with confidence. Instead, my shoes squeaked twice loudly on the polished floor, the kind of squeak that announces, "Here comes a man who has no idea what he's doing." A nurse pushing a cart smirked. "Don't worry," she said. "They all squeak on that patch." "Good," I replied. I was worried it was me screaming internally. She laughed. "Could be both." When I reached the lobby, I didn't have to search. He found me. Lowell sat hunched on one of the plastic waiting chairs, holding a bag of ice to his swollen cheek. His shirt was ripped near the collar, and his shoes didn't match. One was his. One looked like it belonged to someone 3 sizes larger. He looked like a scarecrow someone had beaten for stealing corn. He spotted me and jumped up. "Cliff, thank God. Man, you gotta help me." I didn't say a word. I just looked at him. Really looked. The swollen face, the wobbling knees, the smell of cheap beer mixed with regret. Behind him, a security guard kept a close eye on us, arms crossed as if waiting to see which one of us would explode first. Lowell rushed forward. "I went out with the guys, okay? We were celebrating." "Celebrating what?" I cut in. "Running away from responsibility?" He winced. "Please, look, this is bad. I got into a fight. I didn't even start it. These guys," I raised a hand, "stop talking. Just stop." My patience was gone, burned out like an old bulb. I wasn't angry. Anger is hot, loud. What I felt was colder, heavier, You abandoned May during labor, I said. And then you called me to bail you out of whatever mess you crawled into. Now you're here asking for help again. He opened his mouth, then closed it, like a fish trying to reason with a fisherman. I need to see her, he said quietly. I need to explain. Oh, you'll see her, I said. But you won't like what she has to say. He swallowed hard. Just let me come up with you. For a moment, I almost hesitated. The old habit of stepping in, smoothing things over, taking responsibility for everyone's mess, it twitched in me like a reflex. But then I remembered May's trembling hand grabbing my wrist. Please don't leave me alone, and that was that. Fine, I said, but you walk behind me. And if you open your mouth before I tell you to, I'll personally escort you back to the lobby. He nodded like a scolded schoolboy, clutching his ice bag. I turned toward the elevators, taking a deep breath. But what I didn't know then, couldn't have guessed, was that the moment the elevator doors opened upstairs, my daughter would deliver a sentence that would shatter whatever was left of their marriage. When the elevator dinged, I half expected Lowell to bolt. Instead, he huddled in the corner like he hoped the metal walls might swallow him whole. I stood stiffly beside him, arms crossed, trying to look more in control than I actually felt. Truth be told, my stomach was doing the kind of flips I hadn't felt since high school gym class, when Coach Turner forced me onto the parallel bars, and I fell off before even grabbing them. Twice. The doors slid open to the maternity floor, and the nurses at the station froze mid-sentence. Their eyes went straight to Lowell's battered face, then to me, then back to him. One whispered, "Oh, he finally showed up," with the kind of judgment only a maternity nurse can master. Another nudged her coworker and muttered, "She's not going to let him in." I didn't disagree. As we walked down the hallway, I noticed Lowell limping. "Why are you walking like that?" I asked. "They, took my shoe," he muttered. "Just the one? They said I disrespected the vibe." I blinked. "You got robbed by philosophers?" He didn't answer. He just looked miserable. And if I weren't so furious, I'd almost have felt sorry for him. Almost. When we reached May's door, he hesitated, clutching the ice bag like it was a security blanket. I pushed the door open with my shoulder, trying to do it smoothly and accidentally bumping it too hard. The door bounced back and smacked me in the forehead with a soft thud. From the bed, May rasped, "Dad, did you just fight the door?" "Door swung first," I muttered, rubbing my head. Little moments like that used to embarrass me. Now they just reminded May that even in chaos, her dad was still her dad. May looked exhausted, pale, sweaty, fragile in a way that made my chest ache, but her eyes were sharp the moment they landed on her husband. She stiffened, one arm instinctively curling protectively around the baby sleeping on her chest. Lowell stepped inside with the gait of someone approaching a sleeping bear. "May, sweetheart." She cut him off, voice cold and cracked from hours of screaming and crying. "No, don't call me that." He froze. I stayed by the foot of the bed, arms crossed again, just in case he forgot how to act human. "You left me," she said quietly. "During labor you left." "I know," he whispered. And then you went drinking." "It wasn't like that." "And then you called my father instead of coming back." He swallowed. I panicked. She let out a small laugh, dry, humorless but painfully familiar. I panicked too, Lowell. But I didn't run off to Murphy's to make it someone else's problem. He looked at the floor like it might provide him a script. "I made a mistake." "Ah, mistake," she echoed. "Lowell, forgetting to buy milk is a mistake. I made a mistake. Milk is a mistake. Leaving your wife in a delivery room and ending up in a fistfight 2 hours later is a pattern." I glanced at her with a quiet awe. I'd never heard her voice sound so steady. He took one timid step closer. "May, I want to fix this. I'll be better. I swear I will." She shook her head slowly. "No, you won't. Because you don't think you did anything wrong. You just think you got caught." Lowell wobbled back a little, like the words themselves hit him. "And one more thing," May whispered, adjusting the blanket around the baby. "And I'm done pretending that's you." The room went unbearably still. Even the machines hummed quieter. Lowell finally turned to me, his eyes full of something desperate. Cliff, say something, please. I took a deep breath, feeling my daughter's pain, my granddaughter's future, and my own simmering judgment all mix into one clear truth. All right, I said. I'll say something. And at that exact moment, every person in the room knew the next words out of my mouth would change everything for all of us. I looked at Lowell sitting there with his swollen cheek, his one borrowed shoe, and that melting ice bag dripping down his elbow, and for a strange moment, I felt absolutely nothing. Not fury, not sympathy, just a heavy, settled understanding of the man in front of me. He wasn't dangerous, he wasn't complicated. He was simply unreliable in every way a husband should never be. You want me to say something? You want me to say something? You want me to say something? I said, fine, but sit down before you fall over. You're wobbling like a newborn colt on a frozen pond. Lowell dropped into the chair so fast the poor thing groaned like it had been through enough. For a split second, I honestly thought it would give up on life and collapse. It didn't, unfortunately. Chairs these days are sturdier than the men who sit on them. May watched all this silently, her face pale but resolute as she cradled the sleeping baby. She didn't look at Lowell, she looked at me, and that somehow was more heartbreaking. I was the one she trusted to steady the room. I took a slow breath, trying to choose my words carefully. I've never been good with speeches half the time. I forget what I'm saying mid-sentence and start worrying if I left the stove on. But this time, the words came out steady. May isn't asking you for perfection, I told Lowell. She never did. She asked for partnership, support. A man who stands with her when life gets hard. He rubbed his forehead with shaking fingers. I know, Cliff, I messed up. But people mess up, yes, I said, raising a hand, but most people don't do it while their wife is literally bringing their child into the world. He opened his mouth, then closed it again. His face crumpled, not into guilt, but into frustration, like he still didn't understand the magnitude of what he'd done. She doesn't deserve this, I continued, and neither does that baby. Becoming a father is the moment you grow up, whether you want to or not. May's eyes filled, and I felt my throat tighten. 50 years old, but I still get mushy at moments like that. My dad once told me, when your kid cries, you cry in your soul. Only now did I truly understand it. Lowell suddenly leaned forward, clutching the ice bag. Cliff, just tell her to give me one more chance. One. I'll fix everything. I swear I'll. Don't swear. I cut in. Save your breath for doing. Not promising. He swallowed hard. Behind him, the heart monitor hummed. The newborn squeaked softly in May's arms, and life kept reminding him exactly where he wasn't standing. He tried again. Please, talk to her. She'll listen to you. No, I said quietly. She will hear you, but she won't listen the way you want. May finally lifted her gaze to him, her voice steady but hoarse. Dad is right. And that alone hit him harder than the punch that gave him that bruise. He slumped, defeated. For a moment, the room fell into an odd stillness. Then, because fate has a twisted sense of timing, the ice bag in his hand slipped, fell to the floor, and burst open like a sad little water balloon. Ice skittered under the chairs and across the linoleum. I jumped. The nurse at the door jumped, but the baby didn't even flinch. That kid had already decided chaos was normal in this family. I sighed. Great. Now we've got a climate emergency on the floor. May laughed a tiny, broken laugh, but a real one. And suddenly I knew, despite the mess, despite Lowell's implosion, despite everything, she was slowly reclaiming her strength. Still, underneath that moment of levity, tension pressed tight against my ribs. Because I could feel it, Lowell hadn't told us everything about his night, and the truth he was hiding was about to explode our world all over again. The nurse came in to clean the ice scatter, glaring at Lowell like he'd spilled oil all over a church floor. She knelt down, scooping cubes into a metal bowl that clinked louder than necessary. I tried to help, bending down with my knees cracking like popcorn. But the moment I reached for a cube, my fingers slipped, and it shot out from under me like a runaway marble. The nurse gave me a look, Sir, please don't add to the situation. I am the situation, I muttered, standing back up with all the grace of a man twice my age. While she worked, Lowell kept rubbing his hands together as if friction alone could erase his guilt. May didn't look at him anymore. She focused on the baby, tracing the tiny nose with her fingertip, whispering something only a new mother would understand. Watching her like that, calm, protective, wounded yet unbroken, I felt something shift inside me. Pride, fear, sorrow, all mixed up like mismatched paint. Then Lowell cleared his throat. A thin, shaky sound. There's something I need to tell you both. May didn't answer. She didn't even blink. I folded my arms, already bracing myself. He swallowed hard. That fight I got into, it wasn't really a fight. I mean, not at first. My stomach tightened. Then what was it? He squeezed the ice bag, what was left of it, until the plastic crackled. Someone accused me of something. Something I didn't do. May finally looked up, but not with softness, with suspicion. One of the women at Murphy's, she got into an argument with her boyfriend. He thought I was hitting on her. I closed my eyes for a moment. Were you? No, I swear. She bumped into me, that's all. May raised an eyebrow. Lowell, you don't just bump into women at bars on the night your wife is in labor. He flinched. It wasn't like that. Cliff, please tell her men misunderstand things all the time. Oh no, I said, shaking my head. You're not pulling me into that battlefield. I barely survive conversations with store cashiers. He stepped forward, desperate now. After he saw us well, her bumping into me, he lost it. Next thing I know, I get punched, shoved outside, and everyone's shouting. And you didn't leave because your wife was giving birth? May asked, voice trembling but sharp. No, he whispered. I couldn't. They took my phone, my wallet, even my keys. I stared at him, not because I believed him, but because of the sheer absurdity of it all. So I said slowly, you managed to get yourself robbed, punched, and stranded on the one night you were absolutely expected to stay sober and present. I didn't plan any of it, he cried. Life rarely lets you schedule your disasters, I said, but you do get to choose where you stand when they happen. May held the baby closer, her lip trembling not from weakness, but from the realization she was finally done. But Lowell wasn't. He wiped his nose with the back of his hand. There's more. May stiffened. I felt a cold ripple crawl up my spine. I got a call, he continued, from the bar manager. They said police might want statements. And I told them that if anyone asks, I was at the hospital the whole night. My hands curled into fists before I could stop them. May's mouth fell open, shocked into silence. You lied to cover yourself, I said, my voice dropping so low it surprised even me. He nodded miserably. I just panicked. You panicked before, I snapped. This is cowardice. May let out a small, devastated breath. You were willing to drag my father into a lie to save your reputation? Lowell tried to speak, but the words tangled in his throat. I didn't think. No, she said, tears welling. That's exactly the problem. The room thickened with tension. Even the baby stirred, fussing softly. I stepped back, gripping the bed rail for balance, because something inside me understood we had finally crossed the point of no return. And just when I thought the worst of the truth had been scraped out of him, Lowell's eyes widened like he suddenly remembered the biggest secret of all. May, Cliff, I didn't just lose my wallet. He paused. I lost something else. Something that's about to make everything 10 times worse. For a long, heavy moment, Lowell just stared at the floor. And it knew to do, with having a dozen unwains. His jaw trembled, his fingers twitched, and his whole posture suggested he was searching for a hole in the linoleum he could crawl into. May waited, eyes narrowed above the baby's tiny head. I waited too, leaning slightly on the bed rail, because my knees had decided they'd had enough drama for one lifetime. Finally, Lowell lifted his head. I lost my wedding ring. May inhaled sharply, like he'd slapped her. I blinked. slowly. You what? I asked. He held up his bare left hand, as if we needed visual confirmation of his stupidity. It must have fallen off during the fight, or when they grabbed my pockets. I don't know. I rubbed my face with both hands. Out of all the nights you could have lost that ring, May whispered. Unbelievable. But it came out like a prayer, and a curse had a child. He rushed forward a step. It didn't mean anything. I cut him off. Don't say it. Because whatever excuse you think you have will sound worse than silence. He froze. Silence won. Then, because my timing in life is impeccable, I tried to take a step forward and my hospital shoe cover snagged on the leg of the supply cart. I stumbled so fast I had to grab the edge of the bed to steady myself, nearly pulling the entire IV pole with me. The monitor beeped angrily like it was personally offended by my existence. Dad? May said, half laughing through her tears. I'm fine, I grumbled, just trying out a new dance move, thinking of taking it on the road. Once I stopped threatening nearby medical equipment, I turned back to Lowell. His eyes were shiny fear, embarrassment, or the sting of multiple terrible decisions catching up to him. Hard to tell. May's voice came out low and razor sharp. You lost your ring at a bar after abandoning me, then lied to the manager that you'd been at the hospital. Lowell, do you hear what kind of story that builds? He tried to explain, but each attempt came out like a dying balloon. I didn't. It wasn't. She bumped. I swear. Stop, May said. Not loudly, not harshly, just final. He did. Even the machine seemed to pause with him. You know, she said, stroking the baby's tiny back, I could forgive a lot. I could even forgive stupidity. And not dishonesty. Lowell's head dropped so low I wondered if he was trying to look at his own shoes and remember which one wasn't his. He sniffed. I want to be a father to her. May shook her head slowly. You weren't one tonight. That line hit him harder than any punch he took at Murphy's. He wiped his eyes with the back of his hand and looked at me. Desperate. Cliff, please. Say something. Help me. I took a breath. A slow one. I felt every year of my 50 pressing on my shoulders, every memory of raising May, every moment I'd ever told myself I'd keep her safe, even from the people she loved. Lowell, I said quietly, I will always support my daughter. Always. But you? Tonight you showed me exactly who you are, and now May finally sees it too. He staggered back like the words themselves pushed him, and maybe they did. But before the weight of that truth could settle, the door swung open and the bar manager himself stepped inside, still wearing his Murphy's apron, eyes scanning the room. Sorry to interrupt, he said, but the staff told me this is where the guy from earlier ended up. We need to clear something up about what he did before he left. Lowell's face drained of all color. May's grip tightened. My stomach sank. Whatever the manager was about to say, it was going to hit harder than anything we'd heard yet. The room froze when the bar manager stepped inside, apron dusted with flour, hair still wild from whatever disaster he'd come running from. He looked at me, at May, then at Lowell, and his expression shifted into something uneasy. Sorry to barge in, he said, voice low, but I need to set something straight. Your, son-in-law didn't just get into a scuffle. He hesitated, glancing at Lowell. He caused it. Lowell shook his head violently. No, that's not what happened. But the manager pressed on. He marched behind the bar, yelling at the staff because they stopped serving him. Tried to take a bottle himself, knocked over 2 chairs, insulted a regular, then picked a fight with a guy 10 times calmer than him. May's eyes widened. Mine narrowed. And when we threw him out, the manager continued, he shouted that he had more important things to deal with than all of us. Even said, he paused, said his wife could handle herself. The words hit like cold steel. Lowell collapsed into the chair, his face a shade of chalk. I didn't mean any of that, he whispered. But May wasn't listening anymore. Her expression shifted. Not explosive, not broken, just done. A quiet, devastating end to every thread she'd held onto. The manager cleared his throat and added, We found his ring. It was behind the bar. Looked like it was thrown, not dropped. He handed it to me. A small, dull circle of gold with a dent on one side. I didn't say a word. I simply placed the ring on the table beside May. She didn't reach for it. "Thank you," she told the manager softly. "We understand," he nodded and left. The door clicked shut behind him, sealing the final truth in the room. Lowell reached for the ring with shaking fingers. "May, please. I messed up. I know. But I can change. I will. I swear to you." She lifted her hand just a little and he stopped talking instantly. "No, Lowell, you won't." Her voice was steady, almost gentle, because tonight wasn't an accident. It was a choice. Every step of it. And I finally see that I've been hoping for a man who doesn't exist. He broke, shoulders shaking, face crumpling. He leaned forward, as if the floor might hold him. "Don't do this." But May looked at our baby small, warm, safe against her chest, and her eyes hardened with a mother's clarity. "I choose her," she said, "and choosing her means protecting her from the chaos you bring." Lowell sobbed openly now, but she didn't turn away, not cruelly, just with a quiet firmness that comes when a woman finally stops apologizing for her own pain. I walked to him slowly. My joints popped, my feet hurt, and I felt older than 50 in that moment, but I stood tall. "Lowell," I said, steady as a gatepost in a storm. "You can be part of this child's life someday. But not tonight. Not like this. You need help. Real help. And until you get it, you stay away." He lifted his eyes to me, red, lost, angry, pleading, but I didn't flinch. He stood, swayed slightly, and for a moment I thought he'd argue. But he didn't. He just nodded once, defeated. Then he walked to the door, paused, and whispered, "I'm sorry." He left, and for the first time all night, the room felt still. I sat beside May. She leaned her head on my shoulder, her baby curled against her heart. The quiet hummed around us, soft, warm, honest. "I'm sorry you had to go through this," I whispered. She shook her head. "I'm not. I'd rather know the truth now than live a lifetime in the dark." I stroked her hair like I did when she was little. "You're stronger than you think," she smiled faintly. "I learned from the best." And right then, holding my daughter and granddaughter, my family, I knew something simple and true. Lowell had walked out of that hospital alone. But May walked out with everything that mattered. And me, I didn't just get through the night. I stood my ground. I protected my own. And in the end, I won back something far more precious than pride, my daughter's trust, and the promise that our family would rebuild, even from this wreckage. Because some storms break you, but others, they clear the sky.